Hi, everybody. I'm Nick,
And I'm Natasha.
and we are the Living Vertizontal Podcast, back with you this week to continue our journey through the Gospel of Luke together. As a quick reminder, last week we looked at Luke chapter 18, verses 18 to 30, where we read about the encounter between Jesus and the rich young ruler. Together, we talked about the importance of keeping God at the center of our lives. This week, we're going to follow up on that, really with completing the journey through Luke 18. So looking at Luke chapter 18, verses 31 through 43. And in this passage, Jesus predicts his death for a third time and then encounters a blind man in Jericho area. So, Natasha, will you go ahead and read our passage for today, and then we'll jump in for a conversation?
Sure. So Luke chapter 18, verse 31. Then Jesus took the 12 aside and said to them, "Look, we are going up to Jerusalem, and everything the prophets have written about the Son of Man will be fulfilled. He will be delivered over to the Gentiles and will be mocked and insulted and spit upon. They will flog him and kill him, and on the third day he will rise again." But the disciples did not understand any of these things. The meaning was hidden from them, and they did not comprehend what he was saying. As Jesus drew near to Jericho, a blind man was sitting beside the road begging. When he heard the crowd going by, he asked what was happening. "Jesus of Nazareth is passing by," they told him. So he called out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Those who led the way admonished him to be silent, but he cried out all the louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stopped and directed that the man be brought to him. When he had been brought near, Jesus asked him, "What do you want me to do for you?" "Lord," he said, "let me see again." "Receive your sight," Jesus replied. "Your faith has healed you." Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus, glorifying God. And all the people who saw this gave praise to God.
All right. Thank you for reading that for us today. As we move into our conversation, I do think really the only piece that I want to bring up is contextually speaking, we're on this journey, right? We're still on the journey. We get a little bit of a signpost here where Jesus interacts with somebody kind of on the outskirts of Jericho as he's drawing near to Jericho. So we know that Jesus is getting nearer to Jerusalem, but we're still going.
Yes.
Still going, still have not fully arrived. So we know that from Luke chapter 9 on, this has been kind of the thrust of where we're going. And so we're still on the way. And while on the way, we have yet another moment where Jesus predicts his sacrifice, what is to come when they get into Jerusalem. So I guess just with that, where do we want to jump in on this conversation?
Well, I think one of the first things for us to recognize, and this isn't the first time that this has been, a main theme. So Jesus tells the disciples what's coming.
Yeah.
And they don't get it.
Yeah.
And they really don't get it. And this is a common theme that seems to come up throughout Luke. Jesus is explaining, he's trying to teach what it means to be the Messiah, trying to give them new insights into who this is, trying to help address misconceptions, all of these things. And once again, Jesus does that here, and they still do not get it.
Right. Yeah. I guess when you look at this, so there's a whole lot of thoughts that I have, I feel like, about this beginning piece. Maybe partially because of the conversation that we had around this table on Tuesday night last week for our encounter group, but then also what we kind of talked about on Sunday morning with the group that we were sitting with. So I don't necessarily know where I need to begin, and I may be jumping around a lot. But first, number one, like something that really caught my attention for the first time on Sunday morning was Jesus's command in verse 31 to look. Right? Look, we are going up to Jerusalem. Look. And so it's just interesting to me, ironic to me. Maybe irony is more the appropriate word to use because that's going to be present throughout this passage. But ironic to me that Jesus's command at the outset of our passage is to look. And then we have like this follow-up of the disciples not actually perceiving what he's calling out, contrasted with a blind man who can't physically perceive anything really, like
Right.
visually, but able to perceive unlike his disciples. So just the irony already is thick.
Yeah, he's already setting the stage with his command to look.
Yes, yeah. And then the other piece that really sticks out to me, and this might be a little bit longer of a conversation, because it kind of encompasses the rest of what's going on, both maybe why the disciples don't understand, like why it's unclear to them, and maybe others, like why others wouldn't be understanding. And that is at, let's see, it's in also in verse 31, the title Son of Man is used again, right? Jesus uses that title. That's a title that came into the scene a few weeks back, if I remember correctly, where it was in reference to Jesus speaking to the Pharisees, I believe, the Pharisees and his disciples, when he was talking about the when and where conversation of the kingdom of God. And he brought up one like the Son of Man. And so that's a reference to Daniel 7. And what is brought up in that specific prophecy is going to be that there's one like the Son of Man who comes and essentially like delivers, like this major understanding of deliverance, of restoration, of like everything being put back right for Israel.
Okay.
And so it's what they've been yearning for. It's what they've been looking for in the Messiah for years and years and years.
So this Daniel 7 passage really is the victorious conquering king that we think of, or that the disciples were thinking of when they were thinking Messiah.
Yes, undoubtedly so. And then Jesus, though, follows that up with verse 32, where he makes a whole lot of other claims, which are very in line with the previous two passion predictions that we've had in Luke. So like this suffering conversation.
So it's not new. He said this before.
Right. It's not new. It's not new for Jesus to be saying this to them. However, this kind of holding it together maybe is where the newness comes in, right?
Okay.
So Son of Man, Daniel 7. Everything else that follows is found in other points in prophecy, some Psalms, but kind of can be wrapped up in like Isaiah 53, which Isaiah 53 is where you get this idea of like the suffering servant.
Okay.
And so to hold those two things together would be very interesting, especially in this time, because at this point in time, it was a very commonly held understanding, or very common to hold these two things as in different categories, different camps.
Okay.
So one like the Son of Man is great. It's going to be this person that delivers and conquering king, right? Everything's set right. Everything's great. And then suffering servant, one who maybe dies for sins. Okay, this is cool. This is something else though. So I guess maybe the best way to put it is, in this time, the common perception would be that the one like the Son of Man and the suffering servant are more than likely going to be two different people.
Okay.
Something that isn't held together. And the reason is because when you try to hold all of those prophecies together, it's really hard to say, like, to wrap your head around the idea of a conquering king who is a slaughtered lamb.
Right. Yeah. How do you be victorious, sit on a throne forever, and then also be killed?
Also die.
Yeah.
Right.
And be rejected.
Right. So it doesn't compute. And because it doesn't compute, it was easy for them to kind of separate them.
Okay.
And so that's more than likely what we're dealing with here in the mindset and mentality of the disciples who Jesus pulls aside. And so when Jesus is talking about his passion in this way, this third time, I think he is doing something very intentional and very specific that is also very hard for them to wrap their minds around, as he is recognizing kind of the trajectory of culture and their mindset about these two things.
Yeah, it's a huge misconception.
Huge misconception and a huge shift that he's trying to make, a huge theological shift that he's trying to make, where he's like, look, I know these are kind of two different things, at least you guys have thought about these as two different things or two different people, but look, me, the Son of Man, we're about ready to go to Jerusalem. And as we do, rather than like that triumphal entry that, I mean, I guess there is going to be a triumphal entry, right?
Be careful.
But rather than that being followed on by this like reigning victorious king, it's going to look a little bit different. And this is how the one like the Son of Man and the suffering servant come together in one person. And I am that one person.
Mm. Yeah. And of course they can't perceive this, right? And Luke
still doesn't compute.
Luke makes that very clear. I mean,
Yes.
he says it 3 different ways in verse 34 when it follows. He says the disciples did not understand any of these things. The meaning was hidden from them. They did not comprehend what he was saying. I mean, Luke is really emphasizing, don't miss this. The disciples did not get this. And I feel like this is what can happen when we try to interpret Jesus or his kingdom activities through a lens of what we already expect him to do.
Yep.
And that can be a really big danger. We can know scripture really, really well. We can think that we understand all of who God is. And when we carry our suppositions into situations, we can actually miss Jesus's activity really well. I mean, those who are closest to him had this issue. And so we today are not by any means, we shouldn't expect that we're immune to bringing different misconceptions, right? But misconceptions nonetheless into situations where we think we know best. We think we know what Jesus would do or what he would say or how he would, interact or how he should solve this problem.
Right.
But that's not always consistent with the way that he acts, behaves, or moves. And we need to recognize and leave space for his activity independent of our
expectations.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the thing I think that really, I mentioned at the beginning of this, that the reason why there was so much in this particular section that stood out to me began on Tuesday night last week. And it was this statement, the meaning was hidden from them, that really kind of started this whole thing for me, because I was really struggling with that. Going, okay, so like,
why would God hide
like
this?
Jesus is telling them, but God's hiding it from them. That just seems so hard.
Right.
But then again, there's something that's hard to hold together that Jesus is holding together. So maybe, I don't know. But put that aside, as I was thinking about that more on Tuesday, and then as I thought about it more throughout the week, I came to the thought or the understanding, very much like what you were bringing up with the expectations conversation, is these disciples had an expectation of how things were going to be. And so maybe when we read this statement of the meaning was hidden from them, rather than us immediately assuming that it's this divine hiddenness that is happening, maybe it's more a like hiddenness within that they are struggling with, because their own, like when I think about something being hidden from me, if I can't see like you, right? Maybe you are putting your book up in front of your face, right? And now I can't see your face. Or maybe I'm putting my book up in front of your face. Either way, I can't see you. You're hidden from me. But one of them is you're causing the thing that's keeping me from seeing you. And the other is I'm causing the thing. And I think when I first read this, and when on Tuesday night, when we first encountered this statement, we were thinking about it in terms of like, God, you are the one putting the book in front of my face, hiding your face from me, hidden. But I came to the thought and the realization that no, like I can also put the book up. And so maybe it's actually their expectations that are preventing them from seeing things. Again, very much like what you were saying. And so that's been something that I have really, really wrestled with now for the last week of, man, like where are my expectations preventing me from really being able to see or understand who Jesus is, or who Jesus is, or how Jesus is acting in this particular moment, or maybe what he is saying. I know we say hidden, and so we're just thinking of sight, which sight is very much what this passage has to do with. But also we recognize that Jesus communicates to us and speaks to us. And so there's some hearing involved in this conversation. And so maybe I can't actually hear. Maybe it's hidden in such a way because my expectations are kind of drowning out what he's saying. I almost said trying to say, but he's talking. The question is, am I listening? And my expectations can be a form of, I guess, maybe like an earplug where I can't hear what he's saying because they're in the way. They're hiding his voice from me.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, that can be kind of depressing, I guess, when you think about it in that way. But the good news is Jesus doesn't allow this to disqualify the disciples.
Yeah.
Their misunderstandings, all these false expectations that they hold, it doesn't disqualify them. And he's patient with them, and he continues to reveal to them, continues to, I guess, believe that they will see, right? And so I think with us, the good news is that even when we bring these expectations in, and sometimes we don't even know, like that, I don't think the disciples were aware that these expectations were clouding.
It's a total blind spot.
Right. And so when that occurs in our lives, we can take comfort in knowing that Jesus is patient with us and he will continue to speak to us, and, you know, believing that at some point, like there's going to be breakthrough and we will see if we're really desperately trying to see, really desperately trying to hear. And that's our heart. I think there's good news in that.
Yeah. Yeah. This idea that their blind spot, like Jesus did not dismiss them, right? We read this statement that you read over in verse 34, where 3 different times Luke communicates that they don't understand, right? And yet, rather than dismissing them, Jesus continues to walk with them.
Yeah.
And so even in their blind spots, even in their expectations that are preventing them from being able to see him clearly, he doesn't give up on them. And so in the same way, we can take hope, because even in our blind spots, even when our expectations shroud who he truly is, he's not dismissing us. He's not giving up on us. He is still walking with us and desiring for us to see him clearly.
Yeah. And I mean, he's also not holding them back from conducting kingdom work.
Right.
Now, in their missing it, he's still commissioning them.
Yeah.
Like even now, while they only half see, while they only partially see, he's commissioning them and he's using them to change the world. And so I don't know, we can be excited about the possibility of Jesus using us even in the midst of our inability to see him perfectly.
That's good. Real good. So I guess that kind of takes us now into the conversation on the blind beggar and maybe how this connects together. So what are we seeing there as we move into that section of this passage?
Yeah. So the blind man is definitely seeing what everyone else is missing. And as you pointed out earlier,
Pun intended.
There is huge irony in this, right? The disciples have the sight, but they cannot see what Jesus is doing. Yeah. And this man who cannot see in a physical sense at all seems to have all of the insight spiritually. And we know this because of his declaration that Jesus is the Son of David.
Yeah. So what's the big deal with him calling him Son of David?
Well, I think that so what we know is that the Son of David is going to, from Old Testament prophecies, and you can maybe fill in some references if you have any of those on
try to turn to him.
But the Son of David prophecies would have said that he's going to sit on an eternal throne forever, ruling over all things, making all things right. So again, kind of echoing that same Son of Man declaration. So again, you have that sandwiched suffering servant in there, but this Son of Man declaration is one of lordship. It's one of ultimate authority. It's one of making all things right, which is really beautiful because this man's blindness isn't necessarily good and perfect, except in the sense that it allows God to be put on display to the world, right?
And it allows him to see Jesus clearly.
Oh, true, because it removes all these distractions that could otherwise prevent that. But his declaration that Jesus is the Son of David is a messianic claim to Jesus's his lordship and his ultimate rule as he travels toward Jerusalem.
Yeah, so I found the reference specifically. Yeah. So that's in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 12 through 16, where this promise is made that one of David's descendants was going to sit on an everlasting throne, right? So
Okay.
this is that like Messiah. This is that in a way like David's era of being the king, right? Was the golden age, the
Yes.
golden
Yeah.
era. Like this was great. We know from scripture that David was a man after God's own heart. So like when they think of David as king, like he's got a special spot in the heart of the people.
This is when the times were good, as opposed to the present era where we're being ruled over by Rome,
dominated by Rome.
Yeah.
So hearing this title, son of David, yes, carries with it the fulfillment of this prophecy that one of the descendants of David was going to sit on a throne for eternity. But it's also this, like, it carries with it this expectation of the golden age. Like we're going to be back. Like that, we don't have to deal with this stuff anymore. Things are going to get better.
Yes.
Which is, I guess, if you're them, then it's exciting, except for the fact that you're really blind and confused as to how this even goes together, right? Because, okay, so we think that he's the Messiah and he's going to be this conquering king. He talks about how he's going to die. And now we have this blind man who doesn't actually understand, can't possibly see anything, calling him the son of David. Like, holy moly.
So now he's eternal, but he'll die and raise. So yeah, it just gets, the plot thickens.
Yes.
But what I love about Luke putting all of these names here is he's really painting a very full picture of who the Messiah has always been prophesied to be.
Yeah.
And so we really should be holding all of these prophecies together. And of course, now we get that, right? But back then, this is something that really they're trying to help everyone understand. And as they undergo ministry throughout the world, they're really trying to help incorporate like how the Old Testament fits into, the New Testament and how to bring all the Gentiles up to speed on these sorts of things. And so that they can help the Gentiles be able to also reach, any of the Jews who have rejected the gospel as well. And so Luke, as the writer, I think does a really good job here of painting a good, thorough picture of who Jesus is and who he should be and who we should have expected him to be.
Yeah. I think as you were saying that, the thought that came to my mind was like, how fortunate that we are on this side of things. I don't want to be ignorant and say we have no blind spots, right? But thank you, Jesus, that this isn't one of those blind spots. Like when we were sitting doing the midweek meditations with our girls, with the older four, I guess, our baby was asleep. But the rest of them were up, and our oldest just kept saying, like, I don't even understand. Like, how can they not get this? Why is this still something they just are not getting? And it's just because things were so ingrained into them at this time. Like, the way they understood religion, the way they understood the way God worked, the way they understood how things were going to be, like, that was stuff that had been just indoctrinated into them, just ground into them since they were children. And now they're, older men, people in their 30s and their 40s, people that are even older, right? That are encountering Jesus and they're having to come face to face with all of these things that they thought were true versus like the reality that Jesus is bringing. And I'm sure this was just overwhelming for them. And so I guess, again, as you were saying what you were saying, like Luke is doing a great job trying to hold all these things together to present a very clear theology, Christology, a very clear Christology of who he is and how he ties together all of the Old Testament prophecies. And I guess, sit in a place of gratitude that Luke took the time to do something like this. So that way now, all these years later, the misconceptions that the disciples were having to wrestle with, their expectations that were maybe incorrect expectations that were keeping them in a place of being blind for a moment. Like I'm in a place of gratitude that's not something that I have to struggle with as well. Not that we don't have any struggles that we have to deal with and sort out
right.
Humbly before Christ. But Jesus, thank you that this isn't one of those things that I've got to try to figure out too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we talk about, we've talked a lot in this little section about the irony that's present here. And I feel like it's really important for us to recognize that the disciples walked, like they were living with Jesus day
Yep.
in and day out. And the Pharisees were as educated, or educated. The Sadducees,
As
very
educated as you could be.
right? Like you had highly educated officials with people with status. You had people in very close proximity, and none of these people saw. And so having these things do not always equate to sight. And so it's so important, I think, that we recognize humbly that we don't always know. And so as you were mentioning, all these things that have been ingrained into them always, even the things ingrained into us, that we hold all
Even
things
today,
loosely, and allow the Holy Spirit to continue to guide and shape those things. Again, sticking to the fundamental truths that we know to be true in Scripture, but always holding things with open hands, so that we don't fall into this same sort of irony where we have all the tools at our disposal. We should know, but we can't see.
Right. So I guess like a follow-on or continuation in this conversation with the blind man is just the way that he encounters or like approaches Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was trying to say. Approaches Jesus.
Yeah,
again,
it's so beautiful.
Yeah. Again, brought up very similarly by our oldest as we were sitting around the table working through midweek meditations together. She was like, well, it kind of reminds me a little bit of the persistent widow, the way he's behaving right here. And it's like, oh yeah, that's exactly true. Like the widow refused to allow the judge's initial dismissal of her to prevent her from coming back and still seeking justice. And in the same way, this blind beggar refuses to allow the discouragement of the ones leading the way, the shushing from the crowd, to prevent him from continuing to cry out to Jesus, because he recognizes that his only hope is actually right there in front of him in the form of Jesus Christ. And so just in her making that connection, it, in my mind, helped make the connection of like, that's what's so beautiful about him, about the blind beggar. Like he is coming to Jesus in a posture of complete and total dependence.
Right. He's completely undignified.
Yes.
Yeah. He makes almost a fool of himself.
Yeah.
But yet it exposes just how dependent and desperate he is for Jesus.
Right. There is nothing, we think of something like blindness, right? There's nothing that he can do. He can't just go to the eye doctor and get some kind of surgery or anything like that. There's nothing that he can do to address this issue that he has. And so he's got to come to Jesus, Christ alone. It's like his only hope, his final hope, his last hope. That's it. And so he's throwing himself at his feet. Doesn't matter what everybody else says around him. He's who I got to get to.
Yeah, it's a beautiful picture of what it looks like for us to put our desperation above our dignity. Sometimes I think that we can get so caught up in doing what's respectable, behaving in a way that's respectable, that we don't necessarily practice this sort of posture of public desperation for Jesus, this public crying out for needing him, even in places of worship, which should be kind of in amidst our church like body. We should feel comfortable and safe enough to be able to cry out to Jesus in need, right? Always, because we recognize just how dependent we are for him. And yet this is something that we're not willing usually to become that undignified because we don't want to be, it's uncomfortable to be that vulnerable.
Yeah.
And this blind man, he just demonstrates what I guess my prayer is, that at least in my heart, that I always look like before Jesus.
Mm. You know, so something that has stuck with me in this passage, and I think it connected, it kind of clicked in my mind. So maybe this was a Jesus thought, is this idea of his undignified approach to Jesus, right? His relentless dependence on Jesus, doesn't care what people maybe think about him, right? And then, so he does that, and then Jesus restores his sight. I'm skipping some things. Obviously, there's a dialogue that happens. Jesus says, "What do you want me to do for you?" We'll talk about that in a second. But he restores his sight, and then after he restores his sight, it says that immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus, glorifying God. Right? He glorifies God, and then all the people saw and gave praise to God as well. And so it's like, for me, it's, he approaches in such a way, and then the healing comes, and then his immediate response is praise. And because of this process, this public process, right? Because he is willing to, like, he's not concerned about his dignity, because of this public process that has played out in front of the people around. Now, when his healing comes, it's not just a moment where he praises the Lord, but all of the people who saw gave praise to God. And just, I guess, in what ways is our unwillingness to be this undignified actually stifling the praise that belongs to God? Right? Like, when we're afraid to be this vulnerable in the midst of our communities, in the midst of our church communities, right? Like on a Sunday morning when we gather together, in a midweek time when we're gathered together,
Even with our neighbors and friends.
Like when we are trying to keep things close to the chest, right? When we're trying to
keep things private. They're private matters,
right?
Oftentimes.
When we're trying to not necessarily put all this stuff on display, which I want to be careful and not just be like, oh yeah, everything's just air out your laundry, but maybe, right? Like maybe there is an example of the good that can come when we live in this way, when we live so open and allowing people to see the brokenness that exists and the dependence that we have as a result, and then the restoration that follows. Like, if we lived in this way that the blind beggar is living, man, could you imagine the praise? Could you imagine the worship and the response from people, and just how impactful that could be?
Yeah, we talk often as a church about being bravely vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
Or boldly vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think this is one area where we really stand to see the most kingdom impact from it. I mean, our response, for us to think that our response does not have an impact on other people, is silly. Our response absolutely impacts other people and helps them to see Jesus clearly too. And when Jesus gives something to you, whether it's revelation, whether it's some sort of miracle in your life, whatever it is, these things oftentimes are meant to be shared. And I would say definitely every time, probably worth taking to Jesus and saying, okay, Jesus, is this just for me, or is this for everyone else too? Because it would be disobedient and a disservice to the kingdom to not share the glory of God in the miraculous things he's accomplished in your life, even in your private life.
Yeah. Well, and I even think, so yes, like, take it to Jesus. Is this something that's supposed to be just for me, or is this something I'm supposed to share about? But also, like, maybe we even find ourselves in a place in that moment where we've taken it to Jesus and it's like, I'm not sure. Or maybe there's the internal voice of our own that's competing and maybe getting a little bit louder. And so now it's casting doubt in our minds. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe it would be okay though to then err on the side of, I'm going to share, but I'm going to share it humbly, right? Like there's also a posture in the sharing place as well. Not necessarily like just crazy, loud, outspoken. No, this is what God says, but maybe we can, like, if a revelation, you brought up the word revelation. I know it's a little different than healing that occurred in this passage, but maybe Jesus reveals something to you and you're like, am I supposed to share that? Am I not supposed to share that? Perhaps a posture of, I feel like Jesus said something to me and I'm not sure. I think I'm supposed to share it. I'm not 100% sure though. So would you guys test this with me? Like just that willingness to, again, live it out in front of people and invite other people into the conversation. Because the truth of the matter is, especially as we talk about like our faith community, right? The people who are walking with us alongside Jesus, like they're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to walk with Jesus as well. So maybe we're having a hard time discerning, should this be something that's shared? Well, let's bring them into the conversation because maybe they can help us in that discerning process as well. Yes, there is a posture. You shouldn't come in and say, God said this. That could like turn some people off pretty quickly and actually do damage. But if we come into it humbly, I can't see a downside necessarily. Sorry, I know that kind of went a little bit off the direct line of this passage, but
that's all right. We can circle back a little bit. Probably picking up at maybe around verse 40 might be a good place to start.
Yeah.
So this man is crying out, he's undignified, and Jesus stops. And first of all, Jesus stops, right? Nothing, he has resolutely set out for Jerusalem. Things are weighing heavy on him. He's just declared all these horrific things that are going on in his own life, and yet he stops. He has the time, right, to stop and see other people, even in the midst of his own, I'm sure, internal wrestling with the implications of his statement that the Son of Man is going to be mocked, turned over to the Gentiles, insulted, spit upon, flogged, killed. All of these things, right, are probably weighing very, very heavy on him, even at this point. And yet he hears this man and he stops because his problem is worth Jesus paying attention to. And I think that's an encouraging reminder that God is he's never too busy for us. He's available. He's here. He wants relationship with us. He wants to know what we want, right? He wants to know our desires. And he turns to the man, right? And he asks him what he can do for him.
Yeah.
And this caused me a little bit of pause because I'm like, well, wait a minute. Jesus knows all things. So he ought to know what this man already wants, right?
Or needs. Surely he's observant enough to see that something's not right.
This man is blind, obviously. Okay, come on, Jesus. But then I was thinking, okay, hold on. Luke's been very intentional about what he's placed in here. So why is this here? Why does he write that Jesus asks him what he wants? And I feel like there was a couple of things that came to my mind. So the first one was Jesus saw him and it's like he restored his dignity. So all of this lowering that this blind man did of himself, where he seriously makes himself look so desperate, so ridiculous, so undignified, so unrespectable, all of these things that he's undone himself.
And the lowering that the crowds around him have done by dismissing him and saying, be quiet.
And it's like Jesus looks at him and he restores his dignity by addressing him and then asking him a question. He gives him a voice where everybody else had told him to be silent. Jesus says, nuh-uh, he gets a voice. And Jesus's loving him starts by listening to him.
That's good.
Even if Jesus obviously already knew what he wanted or needed, but that was irrelevant because he took the time to stop and to listen and ask.
Yeah, I would imagine that even not just Jesus, but even the people around probably looked at him and were like, well, obviously,
come on, Jesus.
What do you want? What does he want you to do for him? Well, he wants to be able to see again. There's this assumption that they operate on, right? Because they see it with their own eyes and they come to it and say, well, this is what clearly this man wants. But Jesus dignifies him by saying, what do you want me to do for you? And I think with that, kind of bringing it into today, when we talk about helping people, this whole upside down kingdom that we are invited into, I feel like this conversation that we've been having throughout the entirety of Luke has really been this invitation into participation in this upside down kingdom, right?
Right.
And so there is a very large call to action to care for those around us.
Yes.
In a very practical sense. But I think here, as that practical sense continues to be spelled out, and as Jesus lives an example for us to follow and to see, he makes it pretty clear that maybe just because we see somebody in need and we can look at it on the surface and be like, well, this is how I should be addressing that need, maybe that's not the best way to actually address any need. Maybe the best thing that you can do for anybody is to dignify them with the question, what can I do for you? How can I help you? Instead of this assumption of, this is how I will help you, and almost still kind of operating from a position of power, a position over that person where I have something that you don't have, so I'm going to help you out, help you up. Maybe instead of that, this clearly demonstrates really an even further upside down kingdom of, we're going to operate from a position of equality, operate from a position of mutual, like seeing each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see you. Sure, Jesus probably could come into it and point out any number of things that could be addressed as well as anybody else in that crowd. And yet instead of pointing them out and acting like he on his own right would address it or could address it, he asked him,
yeah,
how can I help you?
Yeah. And I think the other thing too that Jesus was doing in asking this question, in addition to giving him dignity, was that he was seeking to establish that relationship, right? To give a platform or a stage for his dependents, right? Because when we come to Jesus with our needs, as opposed to Jesus just seeing our needs and acting, right? When we come to Jesus with our needs, then we are essentially professing, Jesus, I have these desires, I have these needs, and I know that you are the best one, the only one for me to come to.
Yeah.
Where else would I go?
Right.
And so I think that this question really has there's so much more going on in this question than I think what I initially gave it credit for on the surface.
Just a simple, Jesus was like, what do you want me to do? Heal you? Okay.
Yeah. And we keep coming back to this place of dependence. And it's exactly. such an important theme. And really, when you come back and you circle back to the beginning with the disciples, I mean, their preconceived notions are a lack of dependence.
Yeah.
And that lack of dependence is what's blinding them. And if we can get to a place where we can really fully be dependent on Jesus for all things, in all seasons, regardless of what we think we know, we think we understand, we think we bring to the table, then we will see him clearly.